what went wrong on the flight of the Falcon. Alright, thanks for tuning in. Make sure that you watch the entire video because I've got a lot of information and I'm going to be rapid firing it at you in the hopes to try to cover everything but keep the time frame as little as possible. Don't forget to click like, subscribe, and if you want to know when I put new stuff out, click the bell icon. Now, on to the show. So, I wanted to review what went wrong with the flight of the Falcon and a lot of the reasoning behind the great U-turn and the coming back. Now, I want to emphasize, because a lot of people have said it, this is not a quit. This is a revision of the plan. It's not an end. So, and I got a list here of things that I want to go on, but the number one thing, and the thing that most of the reasons for the turnaround relates to, is the time for the execution of the flight. So when I say the time, and I'm glancing down at my notes, we're talking about the weather windows and the amount of daylight during the day and the time of year. So when I'm talking about the weather windows, although the time of year that I chose to execute the flight did have a lot of merits to it, there were things that I didn't have information available to me at the time that proved to be insurmountable. And that is, it being the off-season afforded me a lot of opportunities for reduced traffic, easier to find places to put in, space available, things like that. However, what I did not have a lot of information on was the weather types for the year. Now, I knew it was going to be cold, and I knew I would be facing certain obstacles, and I had taken preparations for those, and those were adequate. The weather itself overall, and I review this in several of the videos, the weather overall was just insurmountable given the limitations of the equipment that I had. So things like I was going to be constantly fighting the wind and the storms that ride along the East Coast. Over time, that decision has proven to be correct, as I basically would have been fighting storm fronts the entire intercoastal waterway. At the time of this filming, had I followed the plan, I should have been approaching the coast of Florida right around the time of this filming, and keeping an eye on the weather and everything along the intercoastal waterway. Basically, it's been a giant storm front that has been moving down the intercoastal waterway. When I turned around, there were small craft advisories for the Chesapeake Bay and the entryway to the intercoastal waterway, and it has been that way in the intercoastal waterway ever since. Basically, I was going to get lumped into a storm, and it was going to follow me the entire way. I wouldn't have seen any benefits from the time of year until after I had crossed over Florida and was on the Gulf side. So, the number two was the rush for the execution of the plan. It was extremely last minute, although I did prep for, I think, about a month and a half total. That is an inadequate amount of time given the scope of the flight. My personal lack of experience, which was changing along the route, but it led to difficulties such as my first night at anchor, although I performed anchoring very well. My choice of anchorage was poor, and that was just a lack of experience. On the way back, when I put into that marina, I sailed through a marked anchorage to get to that marina, and had, of course, the trouble getting out of the marina. However, had I stayed at the anchorage, I would have been able to leave on time. So there was a lot of just real-world experience that I did not have that would have helped me great along the trip. My lack of equipment, I had not prepped all the equipment that I had needed, and I had taken a lot of stuff that I thought that I would need that proved to be a burden and unneeded throughout the journey. Had I continued along, space being a concern of mine that showed itself very quickly, I would have been stuck with that equipment for nearly 4 months. And that's one thing to remember, too, when we refer back to point 1, which was the time of execution. Given the limitations of the boat and everything, it actually increased from a 2-month trip to nearly a 4-month trip. So that was more of a burden on the systems that I had designed, which had not been taken into account. So, and of course, financial considerations. I did not have a large enough financial safety net to prepare myself for emergencies like which I had. And that ties into points 3 and 4. Points 3 and 4. Point 3 was boat selection. I have realized I had this idea before the flight, but I was trying to push through it because I was chalking up what I was thinking about to my lack of experience and everything. However, the flight of the Falcon has shown me, and various other things have shown me. I've had some discussion with loopers, people who've had 20 plus years experience actually doing the Great Loop multiple times and everything. I had chosen the wrong vessel. The Falcon's Revenge is the wrong type of boat for what it is that I see in the grand scheme of things. So the boat selection was incorrect. Also, the inability, given the time of year for the execution, back to point 1, but the inability to make major repairs. So anybody who's watched the Flight of the Falcon videos knows that my first night at anchor, while I was scrambling around trying to get everything done, I had inadvertently stepped on the antenna leads for my radio, rendering the radio inoperable. Well, it operated, but it just didn't have any antenna, so it was basically useless. The marina I had pulled into, because of the time of year, the stores weren't open. I could not get the repair parts that I needed to fix it. Although it's a relatively easy repair, I could not fix it myself. And that all stems back to the time, back to point 1, time of execution. The off-season also meant that getting anything for any kind of major repair would have been extraordinarily difficult. Even basics for boats, like oil and possibly little itty-bitty spare parts to keep things going. Although I did carry spares on board, I would not have been able to replenish those spares easily, if at all. In fact, the entire trip back to the marina was done without the availability of a marine radio because I could not repair the antenna leads. So that was a major concern too, and I'm glad that reared its head very early, because although that's an extremely easy repair, and literally, if I had had the ends, would have only taken me maybe 5 minutes to correct, it took 2 weeks waiting for the parts to come in because I could not get the parts locally. I had to have them shipped and everything because of the time of year. Stores weren't open, or they were open in a limited capacity. They weren't carrying parts. You know, they had reduced their inventories because of the off season and things. So that was one of the major concerns as well. The last major point for the turnaround was that I had broken the #1 rule of sailing, and that was schedules. Everything was based on time frames and arrival times and everything, and although it was planned very well, and I had actually received quite a bit of compliments on the amount of planning and preparation for the trip can be executed. It has been given the seal of approval by many, many individuals. However, the schedule with the vessel, and back to point one, the time of year, was ill-advised. Because the vessel did not have the capability of making up any time. I couldn't do crazy stuff like sacrifice fuel burn rates to go a little bit faster to get where I needed. The boat's rate was essentially fixed. Even at full throttle, maximum fuel usage, full throttle, full power, I could not overcome any kind of delays. That was a major issue, especially given the time of year and the fact that I had to make certain distances by certain times. So these are the major components, and it all boils down to that point one, and that was the time of execution. The advantages that I had going for that execution time were just everything based around, I just chose the wrong time of year. The amount of daylight that I had to travel in was reduced and at its lowest points for the year. The weather types given that time of year, at least for 50% of the travel, the fact that it actually the boat limitations doubled the amount of time that the journey would have taken. I had not prepared for that, and had I had done test runs, I probably would have been a little bit more prepared. However, judging by the data that I got during the trip, that test run wouldn't have been accurate given the time of year that I had done it at and the directions. Because although going down the Potomac, I was making 5 miles per hour. Coming back, I was going 7+. That's a significant variant. Also, things that I picked up along the way could have changed things a little bit. Maybe not being in the middle of the channel, the deepest part, being most affected by the current, things of that nature, may have come into play a little bit. But it's just, the plan needed revisiting. And I'm thankful to Ken, I'm thankful that it happened so quickly that I was able to turn around and get back and can readjust everything. So I'm in the midst right now of not only correcting the problems, but I'm also on the market for a new vessel, a more appropriate vessel, and then of course I can make the changes necessary to the plan for the new vessel. But that is the overall reasons for the Flight of the Falcon's delay. It's a delay. It is not an end. I still intend to do this. So, thank you for staying with me if you've stayed through this time. And as always, continue to wish me luck. Hey, thanks for watching. As always, please subscribe. Hit the bell notification if you want to know of new content. And may the winds always be at your back.